Well, welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join in from wherever you are. We really always appreciate your time. I'm really thrilled for today. We are joined by two dynamite people, educators in this field. Megan is a deafblind teacher in the deafblind preschool program here at Perkins School for the Blind, and Amanda is a TVI in the deafblind preschool program. They've been with Perkins for over a decade, and they know so much about this work and working with our kids and really showing that our kids can be reader writers and problem solvers no matter what way. So I'm just so thrilled to learn from them, and you get to learn from them too.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be here today talking about early literacy for children with CVI. I'm Megan.
And I'm Amanda.
So literacy is a journey, not a race. Literacy is all around us. And I know we tend to think of literacy as reading, which definitely is, but it's also so much more. We experience different elements of literacy throughout every day and across environments. And today we're going to show you how you can promote literacy with your children at home.
So just a little overview about what we're going to talk about throughout this presentation. We're going to start with total communication, what it is, and when we use it. We're going to talk about labeling the environment with some classroom examples. We have calendar systems, and both at school and how you could adapt that for being at home. We have story boxes and experience stories with tips on using them within the home environment. And then lastly, we'll be talking about incorporating some early concepts across all literacy activities. So what is total communication? Total communication is a holistic view of communication, often using a range of modalities or even thinking outside the box to create a system of communication that works for the individual. So using this approach is really about finding and using a combination of methods that is most appropriate for that individual, which helps form different connections, ensure successful interactions, and supports information exchanges through conversation. So total communication can include a combination in a variety of different methods. We have touch cues, which are physical prompts on a body. We've got gestures, which are motioning your body to express an idea. The use of whole or partial objects, using a range of textured materials to represent an idea, actual photographs of an object, activity, or person. We have picture symbols. A common example of this is Mayor Johnson's or picture symbols, but it's really a representation in a symbol format. We have print, which can be various sizes based on your child. We have speech, which could look different for each person. It could be a traditional way of speaking. It could be vocalizations. It could be word approximation. And this is often modeled throughout all of these modes of communication. We have sign language, both American Sign Language and English Sign Language, tactile sign, and then sign approximation as well. And lastly, assistive technology, which ranges from high to low tech. So when do we use total communication? Always, always, always across all environments, both at school and at home, in individual academic activities, group activities, playtime, and therapy. I think for our kids, consistency is so important. And we always want to try to model their type of communication throughout their day.
So where on earth do we start? Amanda just went over a lot of different modes of communication, which can look very overwhelming. You know, we don't use all 10 of those with our students simultaneously, but we definitely use a very individualized approach, combining what works for them. So we're just going to go over some basics on how we would theoretically move through different modes of communication. So I'm going to go over a couple of different communication hierarchies for a visual and a tactile learner. And for both of these, it's important to keep in mind that, like I said, this is a theoretical progression. Not all children will move from the most concrete to the most abstract representation, and that is totally fine. Your child might use whole objects to communicate for their whole life, and that's great. They might use a combination of different things, and that's also great. Whatever works for them is what works best. So in this first example, this is a communication hierarchy for a visual learner. So if we were working on learning the word spoon, we would start on the left, the most concrete, the actual object. We would take the spoon that the child is used to using and really explore that, explore the function of it, practice eating together, feeling it. Next, we could move on to a photograph of the object. It's still more concrete because it's still the exact object they're used to using, but now it's a visual representation of it. From there, we would move to a picture symbol, such as a Mayor Johnson, which is one of the picture symbols Amanda mentioned earlier. But if you don't have access to things like Mayor Johnson software, that it can be drawn, you can hand draw picture symbols. And from there, we'd move on to the most abstract, which is the written word for spoon. So similarly, this is the communication hierarchy progression for a tactile learner. So again, if we were working on the fork, we would use the actual fork that the child is going to use for snack. We'd pick it up, we'd talk about this is a fork, it has 4 pointy prongs, we'd feel it together, we'd use it. From there, when they really understood that that fork was their fork, we can move on to a symbolic object. So in this example, it's a plastic fork. It's still a fork. It's not the exact fork they use, but it still represents a fork. From there, we can move on to a partial object. And then finally, the most abstract being the Braille word. And if you're moving from whole to partial objects, a great thing to do is to have your child be a part of the process. So, if you're taking that spoon, you want to make it smaller. You don't want all of a sudden one day there's a whole spoon and the next day there's just half of a spoon there. You should take it together and hand under hand, break that spoon in half. They feel the break, they feel it going from whole to partial. And I definitely know there's a lot of objects that are not easy to just break in the moment. So a little trick we like to use is to pre-break it however we need to, and then use a little bit of hot glue to glue it back together. So it's still like a whole object and you can still break it down together. So for both of these hierarchies, it's also really important to build a strong foundation before you can move up. Just because your child understands 4 whole objects doesn't mean they're necessarily ready to move on to all partial objects. You could definitely try moving to partial objects for those really understood ones. And then it's always okay to take a step or 2 or 3 back and go back to that real whole object, especially when you're introducing a new concept. So I mentioned a lot about concrete versus abstract. So just a little, clarification on that. So concrete would be the real object that's meaningful to your student or to your child. So in this picture, it would be the student's shoe. We're talking about a shoe and it's their exact shoe right off of their foot. There's no representation. It's the shoe that they wear and that's how they know it. As opposed to the abstract representation on the right, you'll see we have the Very Hungry Caterpillar book, and then we have an adapted book below it. So a more abstract representation of the strawberry in the book would be the picture of the strawberry. And even further abstract would be the plastic toy food for the strawberry. We might look at that strawberry and know it's a strawberry. We have that visual experience. We've had the experience with a strawberry. We can connect that a toy strawberry is the same as a real strawberry. But a child might not understand that. They have their experience with the strawberry might be that it's a little squishy, it's bumpy, I can eat it, it tastes sweet, it has a smell. And then when you think about feeling this plastic strawberry, it's a very different experience. It's hard, it doesn't smell like anything, you definitely can't eat it. So that's just, something to keep in mind as we talk about literacy. Something that might look like a good representation and simple to us, just try to incorporate those real concrete things whenever necessary to introduce a new concept. It's also important to work on consistent vocabulary, especially when introducing something new. So, I might look at that picture of a shoe and I would understand if Amanda called it a sneaker, or if Rachel came in and called it a tennis shoe, or if somebody else called it a trainer. I know that all those words mean shoe. But when your children are learning new concepts, it's really important to make sure you're focusing on one keyword to begin with. And a trick we use at school, we put a little print label on there so we know anyone who's working with the student is calling it the same thing. And that's not to say that you can't ever introduce different words for it. Once your child really has a nice grasp on the fact that a shoe is a shoe, then you can move on to saying, oh, a shoe is also a sneaker. They're the same thing. So whatever mode you're using should be unique to your child's level of communication. And most importantly, it should be consistent across environments. So if your child is using real objects to communicate, you should use real objects across activities and settings. So if you're reading a book at home with a story box, use real objects. If speech is coming into your house, have them use real objects, and really for anything they're working on together.
All right, so in the next section, we're going to continue talking about early literacy. We'll talk about labeling the environment, calendar systems, story boxes, experience stories, concept development within literacy, and then some classroom and home adaptation. And again, we want to keep it really, really simple. A lot of these things are things that you probably have around your home, and using what you have and what makes sense to your child. So labeling the environment is a great way to build vocabulary and build connections to objects to the space. We want to use objects and labels that are meaningful for your child for that activity. So on the right, the first example, we have the refrigerator. We've got a picture symbol of the refrigerator, a G-tube bolus, and a sippy cup. So your child might have their G-tube food in the fridge, and that might be where they know to go to get those supplies. So using the bolus is a great example for that way. But maybe they have the juice and they go into the fridge and they get the juice for when they're thirsty. And adding and placing labels at eye level is really important too. So that when they go and access all the things in the fridge, that's right at eye level, that they could take it off, they could match it. And we love using objects that are easy to duplicate in calendar systems for matching, which we're going to talk about next. And the example below too is a diaper paired with a picture symbol. All right, so who needs a calendar system? Everyone. How did you know that you were supposed to be here today? Either a calendar invite or a sticky note or written down in your agenda. Calendar systems help promote and develop so many skills. It helps develop new and build existing concepts. It helps develop vocabulary around each of the activities. It helps your child anticipate what's happening. I know we all love a preview of what's happening in our day, and I know I thrive on predictability and knowing what's next. It promotes a conversation, reading a book. You can talk about the last time you guys read that book and you had so much fun and you noticed they were giggling and that was a really nice bonding moment for you guys and you're excited to read this book. And again, it relays information. So what's next, what's happening within that activity, maybe what you're doing next as well. And then lastly, it helps develop memory. So looking at a calendar system with a paintbrush and it's time for art and you start to remember, oh, in art, we pick a color and then we paint and we create something really fun.
So calendar systems must be meaningful to your child. We create them all individually based on, the needs of each child. And we have to think about an object being a concrete object that they're actually using versus an object symbol. So take, for example, this feather duster. You or I might look at a feather duster, and if that's in a calendar system, you would think, oh, a feather duster. That means it's time to clean. It's time for chores. For the student who used this, it was a symbol for play. When he first started in our class, when he was just 3 years old, he had never really been outside of his home, and every day he would come in, and no matter how hard we tried and how many fun toys we introduced, all he wanted to do was sit on the floor and cry. He was sad, he missed his parents, he didn't know us, he wasn't used to playing with toys, he was in this strange place. So we kept introducing different things to him every day. And one day someone pulled out this feather duster and showed it to him, and he stopped crying. So he took the feather duster, he was exploring it, he played with it, it made him happy. So the next day he came in, we had the feather duster in his calendar system. He took it out and he sat on the floor and he played with that feather duster. He did that every day for months. That was his routine. He walked in, took the feather duster, he knew it's time for play. He sat down, played with that exact object. So in this situation, the feather duster was a concrete object that was acting as a symbol because he'd take it out and use that exact thing. Eventually, he got more comfortable with us. He started loving school. He liked the different toys we were introducing to him. But still, every morning he'd come in and the first thing on his calendar system was that feather duster. Now he understood that the feather duster meant it was time to play. So he'd take it out, he'd go to the play area and he'd play with different things. He'd play with trucks and other toys. And the feather duster went from being a concrete object to becoming an object symbol. It represented play, even though he wasn't using that exactly to play with. So I'm just going to show you some examples of calendar systems that we use in our classroom. So the first one on the left is a one-step calendar system. We tend to use green for our time for bin and red for our finished bin. That's, completely a choice that you can make. We have a lot of finished bins around our classroom and they're all red. So to keep it consistent, we use that red for finished. So in the one-step system, we have the green time for bin and we put the object in and it's just one thing at a time, the next immediate thing that's happening. So the symbol that's in there, the wooden spoon, is the student's cooking symbol. And, as Amanda said, it's a great way to promote conversation. So instead of just taking out the cooking spoon and saying time for cooking and going to the kitchen, we'd take it out and hold it together and say, oh, it's time for cooking. We're going to go in the kitchen. Today, we're going to make chocolate pudding. We're going to feel the box and then we're going to open it. There's a bag inside. It has powder. The powder smells good. And then we're going to use that spoon to stir and we'll practice stirring together before we even get to the activity. So similarly to the right is a multi-step calendar system. So this one depicts 5 activities at a time, but oftentimes we'll move on from 1 step to 2, like a first then, and then we can move on to 3, 4, 5. We've had them up to 10. There are older students who use ones that are up to 20 that are kind of stacked, which is pretty cool. But whatever visually and conceptually your child can understand for the multi-step makes sense. And for the multi-step, we'll, come in the morning and together we'll build it. It doesn't just show up all put together. We'll start, and that first symbol represents OT for the student. So we'll say, oh, first today we're going to have OT. You're going to see Sarah. You're going to play with water beads. And then we'll say, oh, we're going to find the first open spot on the left. So, promoting all this different conversation and put it on together. And we'll move through each step. And then when we get to the end, we'll go back and say, oh, we're going to review what you're going to do this morning. First, you'll have OT, and then you're going to have snack. Then we'll do motor. Then you'll go to the bathroom. And last, you'll go to gym and see Matt and Maeve and have so much fun. And you can see on the right, we have kind of a nice little built-in finish bucket with a red outline around it.
So in these examples, we have the first one, there's a calendar system it's made out of a binder, one of the smaller binders, and it has photographs. So that first one, it's the bathroom, it's a photograph of the diaper that student uses. And then below we have computer and it's a desktop, and we were really specific about the computer print on here. It's not iPad, it's not smartboard, it's not computer class. So we're all calling it computer all throughout the day. And then next to it is the G tube, where that student places on when they have snack. That's what they get for their snack. So that's on every time there's a snack time. In the next example, we have some picture symbols. It's a picture symbol of the time for, and then books. The student also had a little reward system. So after each activity, he got to pick something really fun. And we used the picture of the Play-Doh. So it's a nice example of how we can kind of mix and match, just so it's a very specific type of Play-Doh that he wanted to play with, or colored Play-Doh that he wanted to play with. And that picture really represents that. And the last example is print with Braille. You can't see the Braille on there, but there is an overlay of clear Braille for exposure. And this student has a calendar system in the binder, and it's mapped out by half-hour increments, and that's how we kind of go through our school day. And so each morning the student comes in and they build it. They pick from a field. Right now there's a bunch on here, but we could always do a field of 3 at a time, or 2 at a time, or just 1 at a time. And the next page in this book is the afternoon schedule too. So it goes through the time of the afternoon, and the last one is going home. You'll also notice that the outside activities are in a different color, and this helps highlight and show what activities they are doing outside the room. So audiology, PT, and OT are all therapies that they leave the classroom for, which is a nice little reminder and a little use of color coding. And then we have some objects, some whole objects. The first one's a car symbol. It's a piece of that student's seatbelt. You can unhook it and then reattach it, and that student can do that while we're talking about it, while we're going to the car. We have an eat symbol, a bolus, for again, one of our students that eats by G2. A music symbol, the tambourine. The student brings a tambourine to every class. It's her favorite instrument. She taps on it each time. OT, at the beginning of every OT session, they use this wrapper snapper and they pull it apart and they push it together. So it's a really nice conversation. We know that they're going to do that every single time they go to OT. So we talk about it. They hold on to it as they bring it to OT. And then lastly, the bathroom, it's a picture of the diaper that student uses.
So all the examples we showed you, we're here at Perkins, we have some different resources than you might have at home. So we're going to show you how to create calendar systems at home. I'll show you how to make your own slant board, and just some really simple suggestions of using shoe boxes instead of those bins. You could paint them or use construction paper. And also at this time of year, Target tends to put out its back to school supplies, which is a little too early in July, in my opinion, but we usually find those great bins in the back to school section. They're usually like $3 each. So if it's something you're interested in, this is a great time of year to keep an eye out for those. And you'll also see in our photos, we use push lights to highlight what's next. We tend to find those at the dollar store, which is a great resource for a lot of these materials. But we use the push light to highlight what's next. So you'll see in the top photo, in that one-step calendar system, we have it shining down on the lotion bottle, which is that student symbol for sensory play. We take the lotion, they put lotion on every time we do sensory. So that's their symbol. But it really just helps highlight we're looking in this bin right now, draw their visual attention in. And you'll see in the photo below, in a 3-step, multi-step system, we have a clip-on book light. So when we have all of the objects up, it might be a little visually overwhelming. It's hard to, focus on just by pointing to it. So the book light's great because it'll hang over and we can really highlight what is next on the calendar system for the student to look towards. So this is just a little tutorial on how to make an at-home slant board. I know we all do too much shopping on Amazon, especially with Prime Day the last couple days. So I'm sure you either have a medium-sized box lying around your house or you will very soon. So just a really simple and effective way to do this. So you'll see we cut the front of the box, but still leave it attached. Then we fold it up to an angle. That's about a 90-degree angle there. No, 45-degree angle, sorry. And then we tape it at the top to secure it. And then once we have that angle down, we cut off the edges just to leave it open on the side and tape it together. And finally, we just covered it with some black construction paper.
What's nice about that slant board too is you can turn it the other way too if you needed more of a slant. I feel like it could work both ways too.
Yeah, and you can adjust it to whatever angle makes the most sense for you.
So on here, again, we have the green time for and red finish bins. So to create this, we took one of the bins from the dollar spot or the $3 spot at Target, and then we added some Mayor Johnson symbols, and we added some felt background to give it a nice black background to show some contrast. In the version that we made at school for like the homemade version, I used shoe boxes. I had a couple lying around our house and brought them in and used construction paper to wrap the green time for bin. I used about 3 pieces of construction paper, which was a little generous. So I think you could probably do 2. And then in the second one, I did red duct tape. But you could use, Meg mentioned, you can use paint, you can use construction paper, really whatever you have at your house. I also called our local DSW and they had extra boxes and they were willing to give me a few of them. So that might be another option too if you don't have shoe boxes at home. But we've also used from the dollar store, they have like really small bins. They have a couple wide ranges of bins. So that's another spot where you could get really cheap ones too.
So now we're going to talk about one of our favorite things, story boxes. So if you are unfamiliar with story boxes, you pair a book with objects and use the objects to simplify the story and represent the main idea of each page. They're a great way to help introduce new concepts through the concrete objects, and a nice way to allow your child to interact with the book more than just turning the pages, which might not be visually accessible to them. It gives a concrete example to aid in comprehension of new ideas, helps develop various concepts, including book handling skills and, order, moving from left to right. And they're created, most importantly, based on your child's interest to make them fun and engaging. So if your child doesn't show a lot of interest in traditional books, this can be a great way to engage them. So when we're talking about story boxes, whenever possible, we really try to use real objects. If we're reading a book and they're talking about an apple, if you can, don't use a fake apple, bring a real apple in, and then when you talk about the apple on the page, feel the apple together, smell it, take a bite if you can, lick it, even take a plastic knife together and cut it with your child and open it up and explore the whole apple. Obviously, that's something you'd have to, replace each time you use it, but it's a really nice experience when you can do it. And a big thing to keep in mind is really try to avoid using miniatures. So if on the page of the book, we were talking about a car, we would really try to avoid using like a little matchbox car. That's really abstract when you think about it. A matchbox car is 1 inch long. You can hold it in your hand. You feel the tiny wheels spinning. That's not what your child's interaction with a car is going to be typically, and even if they did get out and feel the whole thing, it's giant. You feel the wheels, they're not spinning in your hand. It's definitely a really abstract thing. So maybe instead you could use a piece of the side of their car seat, the material that's on their car seat that they'd interact with, or a seat belt that feels similar to their car seat belt. Or even if there's a special toy that you use every time you're in the car, if you can duplicate that, and that's the car toy, and that's how your child experiences the car and what's meaningful to them, that would make sense to them. And when possible, we do try to focus on single colored objects just to help with, visual attention and whatever the, child's individual needs are.
So some tips on using story boxes at home. A lot of the times we'll read the page, and then once the page is done, we set the book aside and then we show the object. So they're really only viewing one thing at a time. And your child best too. If that book is too overwhelming, maybe they just focus on the objects and you read the page and they explore the objects, you talk about the objects, you move the objects in the way that they're supposed to be moved. And it really depends for each student. A neutral background for reading. It doesn't have to be this big black background, really just something that's going to show contrast with the objects you're using. One thing that we did in the past was we've had just like a extra black t-shirt and we've thrown it in where we keep the story box. So if I'm wearing a bright pink top with tons of patterns, then I could throw that on for that day too. just to give a nice plain background. And then we also repeat the same story box for consistency. Again, this is going to look so different for each of your children, but it could be reading the same story box for 1 week. It could be for 1 month. It could be for 1 year, really at whatever pace they need to gain those concepts is perfectly fine. We also use the use of finish bucket. So you saw in the calendar system where we had the time for and finish, we use a finish bucket throughout the whole day. But this really helps show the concept that each page is finished. So after the page is finished, the object is finished, that child can put it into the finish bucket. You guys can say it's all done. It's time to read the next page and then turn the page together. This is an example of a story box we have in the classroom. One of our students loved this book, and Meg actually adapted it and put together the objects for the story box. In the story, the mouse kind of jumps through different paint and changes color. So we have the 4 different colors of paint that is used. We also we found cat toys that are different color as the mouse. So as it jumps in, we change it out, and that's the color of the mouse, a bowl for mixing. There is a paintbrush, and then all the different color paper that the mouse creates. And then one of my favorite stories growing up was if you give a mouse a cookie. So we thought this might be a nice example of something that you could do at home. We have a list of exact objects and then possible substitution for your child because everybody is different. And it starts with the mouse eating a cookie. It's his favorite snack. So if you want to substitute that out and use a favorite snack like a goldfish, or if your child eats by G2, maybe the blended food container. And you guys can talk about once you Once you have your blended food or your favorite snack, then you get really thirsty and you might need some milk, or in your case, maybe it's a bottle or a sippy cup or a cup. It could be so many things that relate to your child. And the napkin, it could be washcloth or bib or wipe or a baby wipe. Also, the broom is a really large thing to kind of carry around, and not everybody who is 0 to 3 is sweeping the floors. So a sponge might be a really nice substitute, and you can kind of practice wiping whatever surface they're wiping after they have the snack and they need to clean up, and you clean up that table. The blanket could also be any comfort item that you might sleep with. So a pillow, a stuffed animal, a blankie. Also the crayon, we kind of talked a little bit about art and what your child does that represents art. So the mouse is drawing with a crayon a picture, but maybe you use a piece of construction paper to represent the painting, or a paintbrush, or the actual paint bottle. And then lastly, the tape, you could just use tape. You could also use a refrigerator magnet or the chippy clips. Really whatever makes sense to your child. And this looks so overwhelming in so many objects within one story, and it's okay to start with just 1 or 2 or 3 and really build up to however many there are in the book.
And I think don't be afraid to change the words in the story to make it match whatever you're talking about. We do that all the time. We take a little bit of liberty with our books, and, we make the vocabulary match whatever the object is that we're using. So we also like to adapt some books. So we're going to go over a few ways that we adapt books. So adapted books focus on keywords and concepts. So, like Amanda was saying, if you give a mouse a cookie, there's a lot of words on the page. You can still read the whole text, but you might want to place your emphasis on the key vocabulary word that you're working on. We simplify pictures, and we do that a few different ways. Sometimes we cut them directly out of the book and glue them onto black or white paper for a nice neutral backdrop. And if you're very crafty, you could also make your own pictures. We add elements to our adapted books. So we'll add different textures. We'll add mylar to give that picture some movement. We'll add scent to it. We'll spray some different smells on to make it a really interactive experience. And another thing we like to do is add page bumpers. So we just put like little pieces of foam in the corner, and it helps you not only locate the corner and like the bottom corner of the page, but it also bumps the pages up so they're not so stuck together, to make it a little easier for your child to independently turn the pages if you're working on that. And we'll also try to incorporate a voice output switch if that's a method of total communication that you're utilizing for books with repetitive lines. So again, to focus on keywords, there's a lot of words on this page. Then he'll want to look in a mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache. There's a lot of visual clutter on this page. There's a lot of words. Maybe what we're focusing on is the mirror. So we have the mirror in the story box. And then on the adapted book, we have, you just cut out the picture of the mouse. We put a simple picture of the mirror and the print word for mirror. Whether or not your child is working on the print, it's a good reminder for you or whoever is reading the book on what the word is to focus on.
This next example is for The Day the Crayons Quit, and we're simplifying the pictures. My nephews love this book, but when you look at the pictures, there's a lot of red on the page, a lot of different pictures. So a way to simplify it is you could just cut it out, and you can stick it on a black background or just a plain background. We put it on the black construction paper. You could also, a lot of the times we will Google search an image and print that out, and then you can cut it out and then place it on the background as well.
We found too, you can oftentimes, if you don't want to ruin your nice book, you can find really cheap copies in the used books on Amazon. We've gotten them for like 25 cents each, and then you don't feel so bad cutting out the pictures. And then this is just a few examples of how we add different elements to our adapted books. So in the first picture, we're adding scent. We're adding that to an object from a story box for flowers. We'd love to have real flowers in our story boxes, but they wilt pretty quick. So, just as an experience, what we're talking about on the page is the smell of the flowers. So we sprayed a scent onto it. So when the child's exploring that, they're getting, that multi-sensory experience. And the middle picture shows how we used a Mylar element. So the butterfly has Mylar on it. You use some nice bright yellow highlighting. And then in the bottom corner on the right, you'll see a little green rectangle. That's what I was talking about with the page bumpers. So it's just a little piece of foam, and they're in a predictable spot in the bottom corner. It's a great visual marker for where to turn the page, and just a little bit of that motor help of separating those pages out a little bit and making them easier to turn. And then on the right, you'll see our adapted book has added texture. So there's a few different textures. There's the really bumped out googly eyes, and then different soft textures on the dog's ear, nose, and his collar. And for some of the textures, we'll use as a matching activity. We'll have matching texture cards that have the same texture. So you can match, the dog feels soft. Can you find the same soft dog? And we'll work on a matching activity with that. So then for using a switch for repetitive lines, this is one of our classic childhood books, Dear Zoo. So at the end of each page of Dear Zoo is the line, I sent him back. So no matter what page you're on, the student can use their voice output switch, if that's what they're working on, to complete the line of the story. So we do this a few different ways. Sometimes what we're looking for is a student to recognize that we stopped reading. The absence of our speaking or signing is the cue to press their switch. Other times we'll give a cue. We'll say, oh, it's your turn to read now. Can you press your switch? And it just makes it a really nice interactive back and forth activity. We've also used voice output switches to say, turn the page. Not every book that we want to read has a repetitive line. So that's a nice way to incorporate a voice output switch too. So when we're done reading, you can request, I'm ready to turn the page.
So next we have experience stories. We all experience events in different ways and have different interpretations about those events. So creating an experience story based on your child's experience can be so helpful when previewing and reviewing different activities throughout your day. It should be unique to your child and how they experience the event. And we like to use objects that your child interacted with throughout the experience. So maybe it's the grocery shopping, and these are the things that you got when you went grocery shopping. Or some other examples could be a beach trip or playing outside. Maybe doctor's visits too. These are the things you went and had a checkup with, and this is what happened and how you felt. And then, and again, just previewing and reviewing this experience too can be really helpful to let them know what's going to happen, where we're going, and then to talk about it, to debrief about it afterwards. So here's an example of an experience story we're using in the classroom right now. Let's go to the beach. And all of these things belong to a specific student. So this is one of our students' bathing suit. She knows this bathing suit. She wears it when she goes to the beach with her family, when we play in the splash pad outside, or when we go swimming each week. It also has her sunglasses from home. She practiced putting them on, taking them off, the sunscreen, and a familiar beach ball as well. And throughout each step, we'll kind of put them on, take them off, talk about what we did and why we put sunscreen on, and so on.
And I think the great thing about experience stories too, we have it paired with a book here. You don't need to have a commercial book. It can just be the objects and you having the conversation, or to keep the vocabulary consistent, you could write out kind of a script to use when you talk about it each time. So literacy expands beyond books. It can be tied into early concepts, which are kind of really pre-math skills, such as colors, matching, counting, and one-to-one correspondence. So in this example, we're working on matching colors. So in the Very Hungry Caterpillar on the left, you'll see, that we have the color red and then a fake apple and a fake pear. So as I mentioned earlier, we really try to avoid using the fake fruit or fake food whenever we can. But here, our emphasis is on the color versus the concept that an apple is an apple. We're focusing on the fact that it's a red apple and really emphasizing that. So we might ask the student, we present them with their red card and then ask them to find the red apple, versus the green pear. And on the right, one of our favorite mouse paint books. So this is a nice interactive book that we do where the students will actually use the paint throughout it and really have an interactive experience. So they're working on identifying the colors here. So you can see the teacher's pointing to the blue mouse, and then the student is being asked to find blue. She finds it, and then she gets to paint with the blue. Really just, again, re-emphasizing that nice concrete connection between the color and the object.
So matching within books, we can do matching with colors, with objects, maybe even the textures of an adapted book, or photographs to the page. So this first example is really nice. It's a student who is starting to use picture or photographs. So he has that really concrete paint bottle, the red paint bottle, and he's going to match it to the page of the photograph. And then in the second example, we have a calendar system to the environment. So this student, before this picture was taken, took it out of his calendar system. He's holding on to it. He brings it to the bathroom, and then he could reach out and match it to the diaper on the bathroom door. And again, it's at eye level for him, which is perfect. He doesn't have to strain or look up or look down or miss it. It's really right there. He can reach out, he can touch both of them at the same time. And we'll do this with all of our objects. Most of our objects that have a location in the calendar system, we'll match it up, and we'll talk about it as we go into the art room. You're matching your symbol as you go into the bathroom, as you go into the therapy room as well.
So just a few things to remember. Keep it simple.
Keep it consistent.
Keep it individualized.
and keep it up. You are your child's best advocate, and you guys are all doing so great.
Thank you so much for joining us. To learn more about CVI, go to cvinow.org. Answers you can trust and community you can count on.